Sandra Bullock breaks down in tears when Keanu walks on stage without warning. The night began like any other award show, calm on the outside, noisy on the inside, full of bright lights, nervous hearts, and thousands of eyes waiting for moments they would talk about for years. But no one in that room knew that something unforgettable was about to happen. The moment people entered the hall, they felt a strange tension in the air, almost like a quiet storm waiting to break. Backstage, Sandra Bullock kept adjusting her dress with shaking hands. She had done this for decades, but tonight felt different. She could not explain why. Her heart felt heavy, like it was carrying a memory she had not touched in a long time. She took a deep breath and tried to smile, but the smile faded the moment she looked down at the empty seat in the front row. It was the seat where Keanu Reeves always sat when they supported each other. Tonight, he was not on the guest list, or at least, that was what she had been told. As the music faded and the host walked on stage, the audience whispered about who might appear next. Sandra was scheduled to give a speech about resilience, kindness, and the importance of staying grounded in a world that changes too fast. She had rehearsed it, but every time she reached the middle part, her voice shook. The words reminded her of someone who had been there for her when no one knew she was falling apart, someone who lifted her without asking for anything in return. Someone who never liked attention, never wanted praise, and always walked away before people could thank him properly. That someone was Keanu. But he had been away for months, avoiding crowds, taking time for himself, trying to heal from things he never talked about. No one knew where he was exactly, and Sandra respected his silence. She never asked him to come, never pushed him. She just hoped he was all right. When the host called her name, Sandra stepped onto the stage with a soft smile. The lights felt too bright, the hall too quiet. She held the microphone with both hands, steadying herself. She began her speech slowly, letting the words fall with honesty. She talked about the pressure of being strong, the loneliness behind fame, the moments when even the bravest hearts feel tired. Her voice softened as she said that real kindness is the kind that happens when no cameras are watching, when no one is clapping, when no one will ever know. She felt the crowd listening closely, but something inside her shifted when she looked again at that empty seat. A strange ache rose in her chest. She blinked, trying not to cry. She needed to stay focused. She had promised herself she would get through this without breaking down. But just when she took a slow breath and prepared to continue, the air in the hall changed. People in the first rows sat up straighter. A few gasped quietly. Sandra noticed it, confused. She followed their eyes. Someone was moving down the aisle, walking with a calm, familiar rhythm. She froze, the words dying in her throat. For a moment, she thought her mind was playing a trick on her. But it was real. It was him, Keanu Reeves. He stepped into the light slowly, wearing a simple black suit, no designer shine, no ego, nothing loud, just him. Humble, quiet, gentle, and yet powerful in the way only he could be. He wasn't supposed to be here. He wasn't on the list. He was never comfortable surprising people. So why now? Why tonight? The audience slowly stood up, a wave of silent respect filling the room. Keanu didn't smile big. He just gave his soft, small smile, the one that reached his eyes. He looked up at Sandra, and for a moment the whole hall disappeared. It was just the two of them, two friends who had been through storms the world never saw. Sandra's lips trembled. She tried to speak, tried to move, but her knees weakened. Tears filled her eyes without warning, falling before she could stop them. She covered her mouth with her hand, overwhelmed. She hadn't seen him in months. She had worried silently every single day. And now he was here walking toward her, steady and gentle, like he always did when life became too heavy for her to carry alone. Keanu stepped onto the stage without saying a word. He just reached out and placed a hand on her shoulder, not pulling her close, not making a scene, just offering silent support. The kind only he knew how to give. The audience held their breath, watching a moment that felt too real, too raw, too human. Sandra finally let out a shaky breath as tears streamed down her cheeks. She whispered his name, barely audible. He nodded softly, as if saying he was here now, she wasn't alone, and she didn't need to pretend to be strong tonight. And in that second, the world felt quiet, as if it, too, was waiting to hear why Keanu had walked onto that stage without warning. The hall stayed silent for a long moment, as if even the air itself was unsure how to move. Sandra wiped her tears slowly, still trying to understand if she was dreaming or awake. Keanu stood beside her with the same calm presence he always carried, the kind that made people feel safe without him saying a single word. Sandra took another deep breath, trying to steady her shaking voice. She whispered to him again, trying to speak without letting the microphone pick it up, asking why he was here, why he came tonight after disappearing for so long. Keanu didn't rush to answer. Instead, he looked at her with eyes full of quiet understanding, the kind of understanding only someone who had seen her at her lowest moments could offer. Host stood frozen at the edge of the stage, unsure whether to continue the program or step away. The audience waited like they were witnessing a real-life scene more emotional than any movie they had ever watched. Sandra reached out and gently touched Keanu's arm, needing to make sure he was truly standing there in front of her. The warmth of his presence made her chest tighten again, but this time it wasn't because of pain. It was relief, the kind that breaks you open because it comes after months of silent fear. She tried to speak, but her voice cracked in the microphone. She lowered her head for a second, taking another slow breath. "You weren't supposed to be here," she finally whispered, her voice trembling. Keanu stepped a little closer, lowering his own voice, making sure only she could hear. "I know," he said softly, "but there are times when you stop hiding, even when you don't feel ready. Tonight felt like one of those times." His words hit her deeper than he expected. Sandra knew he had been struggling quietly, away from cameras and crowds. He had always been someone who carried his pain inside, choosing silence instead of attention. He never told the world how heavy things were. He never shared his battles. He just kept moving with kindness, even when his heart was tired. Hearing him say that tonight was the night he finally stepped back into the world made Sandra's eyes fill again. It wasn't her speech that brought him here. It wasn't the event. It was something else, something heavier. And then she noticed it. Keanu's hands were shaking slightly, not enough for the cameras to see, but enough for her to catch it. He was nervous. He had been through something. He was carrying something he had not said yet. She swallowed hard, realizing he didn't come here just to surprise her. He came because he needed to, because he had something to tell her. The thought sent a chill through her body. The audience waited, still standing, still silent. Keanu finally turned toward the crowd and gave a small nod, acknowledging them with humility, almost apologizing for interrupting the program. The soft applause that followed felt gentle, respectful, careful not to break the fragile moment. Sandra stood next to him, still emotional, still confused. She tried to start her speech again, but the words refused to form. Keanu noticed and slowly reached for the microphone with a quiet gesture, asking if he could speak. Sandra nodded, stepping slightly to the side. Keanu held the microphone like it weighed more than it should. He took a breath, slow and deep, as if he was preparing to open a door he had kept locked for a long time. His voice was soft when he finally spoke. "I did not come here for the cameras," he said gently. "I did not come here because of the event. I came because sometimes life reminds you that you need to show up for the people who have always shown up for you." Another wave of emotions hit Sandra. She covered her mouth again, feeling tears rising. The audience leaned forward, captivated. Keanu continued, his voice steady but full of something deeper, something wounded. "For months, I disappeared," he said. "Not because I wanted to, but because my heart was tired. Too tired to talk, too tired to pretend I was all right. I needed time to heal, but healing is not easy when you try to do it alone." The revelation shocked the room. Many had guessed he was struggling, but hearing him admit it openly was something no one expected. Sandra's heart squeezed painfully. She wanted to reach out to him, but she waited, letting him speak. "And today," he continued, "someone sent me a message that said you were giving a speech about small acts of kindness, about staying humble, about silent strength, and they said it reminded them of me." He paused, eyes softening in a way that made Sandra tremble. "That was when I realized I should not heal in silence anymore. I should not stay away from the people who care about me." Tears finally streamed down Sandra's face again. She wasn't the only one. People in the audience wiped their eyes quietly. The entire room had softened around his words. But Keanu wasn't done. He turned slowly toward Sandra, his expression serious, almost fragile. "But that's not the only reason I came," he said. "There's something else, something I need to tell you, and I didn't want you to hear it from anyone else." Sandra felt the stage beneath her feet shift. Her breath stopped. Something was coming, something big, something that might change everything. And Keanu looked like he was preparing for the hardest sentence he had ever spoken. The silence after Keanu's last sentence felt heavier than anything that had been spoken all night. It wrapped around the entire hall, pressing gently on every heartbeat, slowing every breath. Sandra felt her stomach tighten as she watched Keanu's expression change. He wasn't just nervous. He wasn't just emotional. There was fear in his eyes, the kind of fear someone carries only when the truth they are about to say might break something important. Sandra stepped closer without thinking, her voice shaking as she whispered, "Keanu, what happened?" But he didn't answer right away. He looked down at his hands for a moment, gathering strength, as if searching for the right way to speak without causing more pain. The audience held on to every second, their eyes locked on the stage, waiting for the moment that would either bring relief or create shockwaves. The host remained frozen behind the curtain, unsure if returning to the program was even possible now. Everything felt suspended, like time had paused to witness something deeply personal and fragile. Sandra could feel her heartbeat in her ears. She had never seen Keanu look like this. He had always been the calm one, the steady one, the one who showed strength even when he was hurting. But now he looked like someone who had been carrying something alone for too long. Keanu took a slow breath. It was shaky, almost unnoticeable, but Sandra caught it. He lifted his eyes and looked at her with a softness that broke her heart even more. Then, in a voice barely louder than a whisper, he said, "I disappeared because I didn't want you to see me falling apart." The words stabbed her chest with a mix of sadness and anger. Sadness because he had suffered. Anger because he had chosen to suffer alone. Sandra stepped even closer, her hand gently reaching for his arm. He didn't pull away, but his shoulders tensed, like he was still unsure if he deserved comfort. "Keanu, you should have come to me," she said softly, trying to keep her voice steady. "You've always been there for me. Why didn't you let me be there for you?" He gave a small, painful smile, one that held more truth than he intended to show. "Because," he said, "I didn't want to be a burden. I didn't want to bring my darkness into your light." Sandra shook her head immediately, tears gathering again. She wanted to tell him that he had never been a burden, not even for a second. But before she could speak, Keanu continued. "I was dealing with something I wasn't prepared for," he said. "I got news months ago, news that changed everything." Sandra's breath caught. She felt the world tilt slightly. "What news?" she whispered. He hesitated, his lips pressing together. It almost looked like he wanted to walk off the stage, like he wasn't ready to reveal everything. But he looked at Sandra again, and her eyes gave him strength. "I found out," he said slowly, "that someone I cared about, someone I trusted, had been lying to me for a long time." The audience murmured softly. Sandra felt her chest tighten even more. She didn't know who he meant. She didn't know what they lied about. But she could see the pain behind his words. He had taken this personally. He had let this affect him deeply. "I felt betrayed," he said. "And instead of talking to anyone, I ran away. I thought disappearing would help me find clarity, but all it did was make me feel more lost." Sandra squeezed his arm gently, grounding him, urging him to keep going. He looked at her gratefully before continuing. "And then," he said, voice growing even softer, "a few weeks ago I found out something else, something connected to that lie." The hall tensed again, people leaned forward. Sandra felt her throat close. "What was it?" she whispered. Keanu swallowed hard. His hands tightened slightly, but he kept speaking. "I found out that the person who lied did it because they thought they were protecting me. They thought the truth would hurt me." He paused, and a tear finally slid down his cheek. Sandra froze. Keanu rarely cried. Seeing it now made her heart break in ways she couldn't describe. "And what was the truth?" Sandra asked, her voice barely holding together. Keanu hesitated, his eyes lowering to the floor. "I can't say it yet," he said. "Not here, not in front of everyone. But—" He lifted his head again, meeting her eyes with a mixture of pain and determination. "But you deserve to know, and I came tonight because I couldn't keep it inside any longer." Sandra felt her breath shake. Whatever he needed to tell her, it wasn't small. It wasn't simple. And it wasn't something he wanted the world to hear before she did. She nodded slowly, letting him know she understood. But before either of them could say another word, something unexpected happened. From the far corner of the auditorium, a sharp sound echoed. A woman's voice, shaky, emotional, filled with urgency. "Keanu, please don't say anything else." The entire crowd turned at once. A woman had stood up, trembling, terrified, staring at Keanu with eyes full of panic. Sandra looked at her, confused. Keanu's expression changed instantly, and the hall filled with a rising wave of whispers. Who was she? And what was she afraid he might reveal? The moment the woman's voice echoed across the auditorium, the entire room felt like it had been struck by lightning. Sandra turned sharply toward the sound, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her fingertips. Keanu's face changed in a way Sandra had never seen before. It wasn't anger. It wasn't shock. It was something deeper. Something like resignation mixed with exhaustion, as if he already knew this moment was coming but hoped it wouldn't happen here, not like this, not in front of hundreds of people and cameras capturing every second. The woman stepped forward slowly, her hands trembling. She was in her early 40s with tired eyes and a face that looked like it carried too many secrets. She held a small envelope in one hand, gripping it so tightly that her knuckles turned white. The audience whispered loudly now, unable to hold back curiosity. Even the cameras tried to zoom in, confused but hungry for the truth. The host peeked from behind the curtain again, unsure whether to intervene or stay hidden. Sandra gently stepped closer to Keanu, her voice barely above a whisper. "Who is she?" she asked, trying to steady her breathing. Keanu didn't answer, not because he didn't want to, but because he looked too overwhelmed to form words yet. His eyes stayed locked on the woman, a mixture of sadness and silent frustration rising in them. Sandra felt a chill. She had never seen him look like this. The woman took a few more steps closer, her voice shaking. "Keanu, please, don't tell her, not here, not like this, please." The audience erupted into soft murmurs. Sandra's confusion deepened, and she looked from the woman to Keanu, desperate for some kind of explanation. But Keanu was breathing slowly, almost painfully, like he was trying to gather strength he no longer had. Sandra whispered again, "Keanu, talk to me. What is going on?" Finally, he looked at her, and his expression broke her heart completely. "She's the one," he said quietly, his voice heavy. "She's the one who kept the truth from me." Sandra blinked, stunned. The woman's eyes filled with tears as she shook her head desperately. "I wasn't trying to hurt you," the woman whispered urgently. "I never wanted this to happen." Sandra felt her legs weaken slightly. She didn't understand the full picture, but she knew it was serious. Keanu gently placed a hand on her back, grounding her, silently asking her to stay calm. He then turned to the woman, his voice steady but full of quiet pain. "You had months to talk to me," he said. "You could have told me privately, but instead I had to find out by accident." The room gasped softly. Sandra looked at Keanu, shocked. "Find out what?" she whispered. Keanu looked at her with such gentle sorrow that her breath caught. "That I wasn't told the full truth about someone very important," he said. "Someone who changed my life without me even knowing." The woman stepped forward again, tears falling now. "Keanu, please, this is my fault, not hers. Don't drag her into this. I was trying to protect you both." The word both hit Sandra like a sudden wave. Protect both, protect her too, but protect her from what? Keanu's jaw tightened, a rare expression of frustration crossing his face. "You protected no one," he said softly. "You only made everything harder." The woman looked down, overwhelmed by guilt. The audience watched silently, feeling the emotional tension grow heavier with every second. Sandra finally spoke, her voice shaking but determined. "Keanu, you don't need to protect me from the truth. Just tell me. I'm here. I won't run." Her words made Keanu close his eyes for a moment, as if her trust hurt him more than the betrayal he had faced. He turned fully to her, his eyes soft, vulnerable, and honest. "Sandra," he said quietly, "the truth is, something was kept hidden from me for years. Something that changes the way I see everything. Something that involves you more than you know." Sandra's heart dropped. "Involves me how?" she whispered. Keanu took a long, shaky breath. But before he could reply, the woman suddenly held out the envelope with trembling hands. "Please," she whispered, voice cracking. "Keanu, don't say it out loud. Not here. Take this. Read it first. You both need to understand before the world does." The envelope made the entire room freeze. Sandra stared at it, feeling her pulse race. Keanu looked at the envelope with pained hesitation. He didn't want it. He didn't want this moment to happen in public, but he knew he had no choice. He reached out slowly and took the envelope from her hand. And the moment he did, the woman whispered something that made Sandra's breath stop completely. "She deserved to know years ago, but I was afraid the truth would destroy what you two had." Sandra felt dizzy. Keanu looked shattered. And everyone in the hall waited for the truth that had been hidden for years. When Keanu took the envelope from the woman's shaking hands, the entire auditorium seemed to stop breathing. Even the lights felt dimmer, softer, as if they understood that something delicate and painful was happening. Sandra stared at the envelope as if it were a living thing. She could feel a strange pull inside her chest, a warning, a memory, and a fear all mixed together. She didn't know what was inside, but she felt in her bones that whatever truth it held would not be small. It wouldn't be something they could just talk about and move on from. It would be something that might change everything between her and Keanu. Keanu held the envelope gently, almost carefully, like he was afraid it might break. His eyes stayed on it for several long seconds, and Sandra watched the way his fingers trembled slightly. She had seen Keanu in difficult moments before, but she had never seen him like this, standing between pain and truth, trying to decide which one he could handle more. The woman who had interrupted them stepped back slowly, her whole body weak, as if she had finally let go of a burden too heavy for one person to carry. Sandra looked at her again, studying her face more carefully. She didn't look like someone who wanted to hurt them. She looked like someone who had been hurting herself for a long time. Finally, Keanu lifted his eyes to Sandra. The sadness in his gaze was so deep that Sandra felt her throat close. He opened his mouth to speak but stopped himself. He looked at the envelope again, then at her. She stepped closer, her voice soft but steady. "Keanu," she whispered, "whatever it is, we face it together." Something inside him broke at her words. He lowered his head for a moment, as if her kindness was harder to bear than the truth itself. He took a slow breath and nodded. "I know," he murmured, "and that's why I came tonight. I couldn't keep this from you anymore." Before he could open the envelope, the woman's voice interrupted again, softer this time, full of guilt. "Please, please let me explain before you read it. I owe you both that much." Keanu looked at her, the frustration in his eyes softer now, replaced with tired acceptance. "Then explain," he said gently. The woman took a deep breath. Her voice was uneven, but she forced herself to continue. "Years ago, something happened between you two, something beautiful, something honest, but something you never knew the full truth about." Sandra frowned, confused. "What do you mean?" she asked, her heart pounding. The woman looked at Sandra with trembling eyes. "You remember that night," she whispered. "The charity event, the long drive back, the accident that almost happened, the moment you two thought you had lost each other forever." Sandra's breath caught. She remembered. It had been a terrifying night. She and Keanu had left the event late, and a speeding car had come out of nowhere. They had swerved hard, barely missing it. Sandra remembered Keanu grabbing her hand instantly, holding on until they were both shaking with shock. After that, they had talked for hours, deep, honest words they had never shared with anyone else. They had been close that night, emotionally close, dangerously close in a way that stayed in her heart for years. "I remember," Sandra whispered. The woman nodded painfully. "What you don't know is something happened after that night, something you were never told." Sandra felt her pulse racing. Keanu looked like he already knew exactly what she was talking about, which made it even harder for Sandra to breathe. She looked at him, eyes full of questions. "Keanu," she said softly, "what did she keep from you? What did she keep from me?" The woman stepped forward again, tears streaming down her face. "I kept it from you because I thought the truth would destroy your friendship. I thought it would ruin everything good between you two." She paused, shaking harder now. "I thought I was doing the right thing, but I wasn't, and I'm so sorry." Keanu closed his eyes as if bracing himself. Sandra took a step back, her breath caught in her throat. "What truth?" she asked, her voice barely holding together. The woman looked at her with heartbreaking regret. "After that night, both of your lives changed, but one of you changed in a way the other never knew." Sandra felt the stage under her feet tilt. Keanu finally opened the envelope. He didn't pull out the paper yet, he just looked inside. And the moment he saw what was in there, his whole body froze. His face went pale, his hands shook helplessly. Sandra watched in terror. "Keanu, what is it?" she whispered. Keanu slowly lifted his eyes to her, eyes filled with shock, sorrow, and something like fear. And then he spoke 5 words that sent a cold wave through the entire room. Words Sandra never expected to hear. "You should have known earlier." The moment Keanu whispered those 5 words, Sandra felt her entire body turn cold. It was like time stretched into something slow and heavy, pressing against her chest. She stared at him, her heart pounding so hard that every beat felt like a question. People in the audience leaned forward, their breaths shallow, their eyes glued to the stage. No one dared to speak. No one even shifted. The room had turned into a fragile bubble holding a truth too heavy for anyone to touch. Keanu looked down at the envelope again, still unable to accept what he was seeing. His hands trembled as he slowly pulled out a single folded paper and a small photograph. Sandra froze when she saw the picture. From where she stood, she could not see the full image yet, but she could see enough. She could see Keanu's face in it. Younger, tired, vulnerable, and next to him, someone she didn't recognize. Sandra's breath caught as she instinctively stepped closer. "Keanu," she whispered, her voice breaking. "What is that?" Keanu didn't answer immediately. He swallowed hard and forced himself to lift the paper. His eyes scanned the page, and Sandra watched the way his jaw clenched, like each word stabbed him a little deeper. Finally, after several long seconds, he held out the picture for Sandra. His voice trembled as he spoke. This should have been given to you years ago. Sandra reached for the photograph with trembling fingers, her heartbeat echoing loudly inside her head. She turned it gently, afraid of what she might see, and when the image finally faced her, she felt her knees weaken. It was a baby. A newborn baby, wrapped in a soft blanket. And in the corner of the photo, in faint handwriting, were two names. Hers and Keanu's. Sandra's breath collapsed into a soft gasp. She covered her mouth, her eyes instantly filling with tears. The room exploded into whispers. Some people cried softly without understanding why. Others pressed their hands to their chests, overwhelmed. The woman who had brought the envelope sobbed quietly in the back, hiding her face. "This can't be," Sandra whispered, her voice shaking. "Keanu, what does this mean?" Keanu looked at her with eyes full of sadness and a pain so deep that it felt endless. "It means," he said softly, "that the night we thought we lost each other, something else happened, something that neither of us were told about." Sandra shook her head, struggling to breathe. "The baby, whose baby is this? Why are our names, why?" Her voice cracked completely, falling into silence. The woman stepped forward again, her voice trembling. "The baby didn't survive," she whispered. "It was a tragedy that happened too fast, too suddenly. You were unconscious. Keanu was hurt. The doctors didn't know if telling either of you at that moment was safe. I was the one who made the final decision. I told them to wait, but then everything spiraled. The files got sealed. And by the time everything came to light again, I was too afraid to tell you both." Sandra stared at her in disbelief, tears spilling down her cheeks. Her voice cracked like a breaking surface. "You kept this from us, from both of us, for all these years." The woman nodded, sobbing. "I was wrong. I thought silence would protect you. Instead, it only caused more pain. I'm so sorry." Keanu stepped closer to Sandra, his voice gentle. "I found out 2 months ago," he said. "I wasn't supposed to see the file. It was an accident. And when I did, I didn't know how to face you. I didn't know how to tell you that we lost something we never knew we had." Sandra's whole body shook. She pressed her hands to her face, overwhelmed with sadness she didn't know she had been carrying. Keanu reached out slowly, carefully, as if he wasn't sure she wanted him near. But when his hand touched her shoulder, Sandra collapsed into him, her tears falling freely against his chest. The audience watched in silence, witnessing two hearts breaking and healing at the same time. Keanu held her gently, his own tears falling. "I came tonight," he whispered softly into her hair, "because I realized that healing alone was impossible, and because I didn't want to face this truth without you. We were both part of that night. We both deserved to know." Sandra clung to him, her voice trembling. "We should have known. We should have faced it together." Keanu nodded, breathing shakily. "We can still face it together," he whispered. "The truth hurt us, but it also reminded me of something. You and I, we have always been connected in ways neither of us understood." Sandra lifted her face, her teary eyes meeting his. In that moment, something shifted between them. Not romance, not obligation, something deeper, something human. Something built from shared pain, shared memories, shared strength. Keanu held her hands gently, looking at her with quiet honesty. "We lost something we never knew we had," he said. "But maybe knowing the truth now helps us understand why we always held on to each other so tightly over the years." Sandra nodded slowly, tears falling again. "Yes," she whispered, "maybe it does." The audience rose to their feet, not with excitement, but with the softest, most respectful standing ovation Sandra had ever heard in her life. Not because of fame, not because of drama, but because of two people who had survived something invisible and painful and finally faced it together. Keanu gently squeezed her hand. And for the first time in years, Sandra felt the weight in her chest slowly, softly lift.